What is up, world? Welcome back to episode 6 of the best podcast in the world. I'm back in the driver's seat here at the host position, but thank you to Ethan, who did a great job in our first NFL podcast last week. That was really awesome. If you guys haven't checked it out, make sure to go down here in the link in the description. We're going to add in that last video. Make sure y'all go back and watch it. Guys, we're officially 1 month away from the start of the NBA playoffs, not including the play-in tournament, which is from May 18th to May 21st. Let's talk a little bit about the 4th seed, the Denver Nuggets, and their superstar center, Nikola Jokic, who is currently the MVP frontrunner this year, guys, averaging 26 points per game and 9 assists. Guys, first initial thoughts on Jokic's start to the season and how he's doing so far. E, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Jokic is having a great season. He's obviously the MVP frontrunner. Whether you want to say that's because, like LeBron and Embiid got hurt or because Curry's team sucks, he's still having a phenomenal year, and he should win MVP at this point. What's also impressive about it is that, like, his teammates around him haven't exactly had the best seasons, like Jamal Murray before he got hurt, unfortunately, and some of the other guys. Now, they did bring in Aaron Gordon, which has helped, but I still think they're not as good as the team they had last year going into the bubble, but he's playing better than he did in the bubble.
Yeah, really great job so far from Jokic. He's one triple-double away from tying flat lever for the most triple-doubles in Nuggets franchise history as a center, and that's pretty impressive. He's had 3 in his last 6 games as well. Guys, I want to point out this stat right here. They were talking about durability in one of the articles I read about Nikola Jokic. Of the 10 front-running MVP candidates, they are combined for 76 missed games this season. Only Nikola Jokic and Rudy Gobert are the only ones that have not missed a game this season. Nick, I want to come to you. I put down this question. Do you guys think that Jokic's play style plays into his durability, which might help him in this MVP race?
I think to an extent, yeah, it does. I mean, he isn't the kind of guy who even goes out of the way to dunk a lot, let alone try to make a bunch of crazy athletic plays out on the court. But he's just generally really solid. He's played really well for the Nuggets this year, even if the team is not as good. And a big reason I think he is in the MVP race is, again, because he's durable and he knows not to take a bunch of unnecessary risks when he's out on the court.
Jack, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of it might be because he's not the most athletic guy ever, but I mean, he doesn't put himself in positions to get hurt a lot. Like a lot of times you see guys mess up their knees because they're coming down from big jumps. He's not a guy that can get that high off the ground, so he's not really going to need to land on his knees like that. And I mean, he's just really good at avoiding those bad situations so that he is able to stay healthy.
Ethan, would you say that Jokic's play style is kind of old school in a sense? I really think he plays at this kind of just methodical pace that he's just always in control of where he is on the court.
He's like a new school, old school player where, like, he has a lot of old school aspects about his game. Like when he goes into the post, he'll like hit you with a bunch of fakes and like try to just kind of essentially play bully ball. But then he's also shooting threes at a really high level. So, yeah, I would say he's got a lot of old school in his game, but I think it's just the evolution of the center position. And I think Jokic is an example of one of the guys that is more, I don't want to say feasible to, like, find because, like, he's not super athletic. He looks like a YMCA player. Obviously, he has beyond YMCA game. But, yeah, I think, yeah.
So I want to go around the horn here real quick, guys. What do you think is Nikola Jokic's best attribute to his game that benefits the entire Denver Nuggets team and will play on in the playoffs? Nick, I'll go around Jack, then to Ethan.
All right. So, of course, I think Jokic doesn't really have a ton of weaknesses in his game. Obviously, he has a good post game. He can honestly be a point forward. He's a capable shooter. He's got all that. But I think the best attribute that he has that's unique to him, especially at the center position, is his ability to pass the ball. I mean, guys that are playing at the 5 aren't usually capable of bringing the ball up and running the offense for the team. And that's one thing that makes him unique, and that's probably the thing that helps his team the most.
Jack?
Yeah, I agree. I think the passing is definitely the most unique thing to him. I mean, he's, I think, easily the best passing center in the league, but also his shooting as a big man is phenomenal. He's shooting 41% from three this season. I mean, he's really essential to help that team space the floor and really let them do what they want to do. So I think, I mean, his shooting is second on that list of his attributes, but it's definitely super important.
Yeah, I have to admit, I think in a sense, Jokic compares to LeBron with kind of a pass first mentality. Any thoughts on what we've talked about?
Yeah, I definitely think passing is his best attribute, but I also think it's because like he is a pass first player that you can actually run your offense through, and especially at that center spot, like another guy you could hypothetically compare him to, and just I it, there are completely different tiers, but is Al Horford. Al Horford's a great passing big man, but he's not in the same league as Jokic where you can run your offense through him. Like, yeah, you can run part of your offense through Al Horford, but he's kind of limited in what he could do. And I'm not talking about the Al Horford, the past 2 years, but like a couple years back on the Hawks in his early Celtics days. So I think Jokic's best ability is like how you can run the offense through him and how he just makes everybody better.
Guys, we've seen the ACL injury impair so many players over the past years and throughout the entire history of the NBA. And we saw that again in the 116-107 loss to the Golden State Warriors. Jamal Murray goes down hard on his right knee and ends up, or I think his left knee, excuse me, and ends up having to have surgery on that ACL. Nick, I'll start with you. What are your initial thoughts on this injury, and what kind of loss is this going to be the Nuggets going forward?
Yeah, this sucks for the Nuggets. I mean, but when Jamal got hurt in that game, the Nuggets basically had like a maybe 0.1% chance of even coming back within that game. Like the game was over. Golden State already won it, and it was just kind of like a fluky landing kind of play, which is usually how basketball players get hurt that way. But it's really bad for the Nuggets team because you can make an argument, and this is probably actually is true, that Jamal Murray is their second best player behind Jokic, and he was a big reason why they were able to go to the Eastern Conference Finals in the bubble last year. So taking him off that team, it really hinders their chances of being able to go on a run.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier, guys, that this is a team that is not better than the team we saw last year, and they are projected to match up with a team that is essentially better than they were last year in the first round of the NBA playoffs in the Los Angeles Lakers. Jack, any thoughts on this team going forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a huge blow. He's one of their best scorers, the best shooters. He's obviously one of their top players, but I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world. I mean, they have guys that can step up and do what they can to try to take his place. And I mean, again, Jokic is playing at an MVP level. He can potentially step up. I mean, Michael Porter, Will Barton, newly acquired Aaron Gordon. I mean, they're guys that can step up. It's going to be very difficult. So I don't think that it's likely, but I do think that if all these guys are able to step up, that it's potentially, I mean, they can potentially still be a good team.
Any thoughts?
I mean, I disagree with Jack. I think their playoff hopes are chalked at this point, just without Jamal Murray, because really he's the only other player outside of Jokic that on an every night basis that can generate his own shot effectively. Like Michael Porter has all the talent in the world, and like there are some games where you see it, and there are some games where he's 1 of 15 and should be on the bench, but since they don't have the depth that they had last year, he kind of has to keep playing. So I think their playoff chances are kind of chalked. The only way I could see them like actually advancing is if Jokic just has a crazy run, which is definitely feasible, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, another injury update for the Denver Nuggets is starting point guard Monte Morris out of Iowa State had a strained hamstring. He injured that last night against the Portland Trailblazers in a crazy ending game. They lost 107 to 106. A pretty funny quote I saw a comment I saw from one of the commentators that I thought was pretty funny. Jokic and Nurkic were battling in the post, and the announcer says, "This is like two polar bears fighting for the last spot on a glacier." I thought that was pretty funny. I thought I'd mention with you guys. But yeah, this is bad news bears for the Denver Nuggets. As your starting point guard is Facundo Campazzo, I think is how you pronounce that name. That's trouble time there. Any thoughts there? Yes, I unmuted your mic.
Yeah, the absolute unit Compazzo. Man has some crazy passes, but I don't think that's who you want starting at point guard, especially if you're trying to make a run in the playoffs. No offense intended.
Yeah. And one last comment on this topic of Jokic and the Nuggets is we've got an interesting, circumstance here with this series because you've got the injured kind of Lakers right now with LeBron and AD returning. I think is it on Friday, I believe it is tomorrow or tonight. But you've got a team that's coming back from injuries and a team that is just absolutely devastated and is looking like it's going to be a train wreck for them. Bad news in Denver for sure. Another player that has thrown themselves right back in the MVP race with an epic April is Stephen Curry. As you guys know, he became on April 12th the Warriors' all-time leading scorer at 17,784 points, passing Wilt Chamberlain. He's the first player to make 70-plus threes in a 10-game span and has had absolutely an ecstatic April. Nick, I mean, this guy is about as unconscious as it gets. I'm trying to be unbiased here, guys. This is my guy, Steph Curry, but he's had an ecstatic April. I'm just curious on your thoughts.
Well, I mean, the whole all in all of April, I swear he's been using aimbot the whole time. Like, it's been ridiculous. I think until like last game against the Wizards, where he didn't play as great, he had like a long streak of games where he scored 3, like back to back to back to back. And I mean, he's playing arguably as well as he did the years he won MVP the 2 times before, and they made it to the finals both years. This Warriors team, frankly, if you take them off it, they have no business being anywhere near even a playing round. All right, they're not a very talented team at all. I mean, the second best player probably is, I mean, I guess you could say Draymond Green, but you could also probably say Andrew Wiggins, and that's not really a good thing if you're trying to be a competitive team. But Curry's been unbelievable. And if the Warriors make the playoffs, he is definitely going to get some buzz about being a potential MVP candidate.
Jack, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even put into words how incredible he has been. I mean, before, like we said, his most recent game against the Wizards was his first not incredible game in a long time. But before that, the points that he's putting up are astounding. I mean, 49, 47, 33, 42, 53, 38. And I mean, it just keeps going on. And almost all those games, he's shooting above 50% from the field, above 45% from 3. It's ridiculous. I mean, he's putting the team completely on his back and is potentially bringing them to the playoffs. It's incredible. And if he can continue at that rate, I absolutely think he should get some MVP talk.
Heath?
He has aimbot. He has the 2K sliders turned all the way up. He has the cheat codes activated. He has the GTA San Andreas infinite ammo turned on. Like, the dude, Celtics fan here was watching the Celtics Warriors game where him and Jason Tatum had one of the best games of the year, in my opinion, where they were just going back and forth, bucket for bucket. And some of the shots that Curry would hit was absolutely ridiculous. Like, one instance was, I forgot when exactly in the game it was, but he had the ball. He had Grant Williams on it. He pump fake, got him in the air, and just threw with his left hand and won like it was nothing. Like, the dude is playing on this ridiculous level that, like, it may be better than his MVP unanimous year, where they went 73-9. And it just makes me think, like, what would this team be if Clay was healthy? Because then Curry wouldn't be the first, second, and third option. And you'd have Clay there who could get hot just like that. So it just makes me think, like, what if Clay was here? Would Curry be going on this streak? Or would they – I think they would probably be better just because the value of Klay Thompson, as we've all seen. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely an undervalued player there in Klay Thompson. With that being said, guys, though, the Warriors are 6-4 in their last 10, of course, with Curry coming back. I believe they're like 6-1. But they're still a game out of the 8th seed and still have an uphill climb in the conference. I'm just curious what you guys think about what the ceiling is for this Warriors team going forward. The schedule looks pretty moderate up and down as they go, but still a tough schedule going forward. Nick, do you have any thoughts?
Honestly, I mean, Steph Curry's been really good, but I think their peak's probably first, maybe second round, depending on the matchup. This Warriors team just isn't good enough around Steph to have them win more than one series, I think. and even then they had to play the right team. Like if they go up against like somehow the Lakers or like even like maybe Utah or Phoenix, they're not beating them. I mean, if they end up in the play-in round, they have a really good shot of getting in, because if Steph Curry just goes off for a game, he might win a game or two in the play-in round just by Steph Curry going crazy. But this team's not that good. It's not as good as it's been when they've gone on runs, and it desperately needs players like Klay Thompson to play in order for them actually to be something.
Yeah, I want to jump to you for this quick question. I'm curious, just based on these standings in the play-in game, you'd have the 7th seed Dallas, then 8th the Grizzlies, the Warriors, and the Spurs. How much do you think this play-in sort of format will impact the Warriors' chances, or really any of those 4 teams' chances on maybe impacting the playoffs?
I think it definitely helps the Warriors out a lot, because they don't have to worry about like trying to catch up as much when they have this play-in game, especially like if you're looking like who they could play, like Dallas or Memphis as it is right now. Last year, Memphis was in the 8, and they played the Trailblazers in the play-in game to, who got the playoffs, and Damian Lillard took over and got the Blazers in. So I could definitely see a similar thing happening, especially with just how young the Grizzlies are. But also against Dallas, I know Luka is special and he's the future of the NBA and all this, but Dallas's defense is not it, Chief. So like Curry can easily slice and dice, pull from 30. So, I mean, I would take them against, if it's those teams, I would take them against whoever they're playing to make the playoffs. But once they get into the playoffs, I don't really see them doing much, just because I just don't think they have enough. I think first round, win a game, maybe 2 if they're lucky, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, it definitely would be a tough matchup, whether it's the Jazz or currently in second place, the Phoenix Suns. Those are 2 teams that are balling. They're playing very well right now. Jack, what do you think that Curry has to do maybe to go up in this MVP race? A lot of people are still talking. He's maybe 3rd is what the speculation is right now, still behind Embiid and Jokic. What do you think Curry has to do really to overtake those 2 guys, so for say?
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's anything he can do personally to go up. I mean, I think he's been playing out of his mind. There's not much more he can do. I think the team needs to start winning more consistently, because, I mean, it's extremely rare for an MVP or for somebody to win MVP and have a team not in the top 5. But yeah, the team needs to win more. I mean, if something happens, like if Jokic and everybody else ahead of him gets hurt, I mean, maybe. But I don't think there's anything else that he can do. I think he's been playing at the top of his game, and I think he's done all he can.
Yeah, Nick, I want to bounce back to you to this next question, or actually, we'll go around the horn. I wrote down this question. I thought it was very interesting. Which do you guys think is a more heroic, say, story? Jokic carrying the Jamal Murray-less Nuggets to the playoffs and winning a couple, let's say, a series, or let's say Curry getting this Warriors team and competing in the playoffs? Nick, I'll start with you.
Oh, Curry getting the team in the playoffs. Yeah, I mean, Denver, I know Murray's hurt, but they have a better team. They straight up have a better team. So it's impressive what Jokic is doing, but Curry's been unbelievable this year. And I think it would be a better story, even if necessarily he wouldn't win MVP in that scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's super tough to do what he's doing. I mean, it's definitely more impressive. Like Nick said, the Nuggets just have a much better team around them. And I mean, it's still difficult to do what he's doing, but the stuff Steph Curry is doing is just out of this world.
Definitely Steph Curry, especially when you consider like he hasn't had like his sidekick in Klay Thompson the whole year. Literally, like a couple weeks before the season started, you find out Klay. Which one did he tear his? Is it his Achilles, the ACL? Which one is it?
Achilles.
Okay. And then like Jamal Murray just got hurt, so Jokic has had Jamal Murray for a large part of the season to at least get them to a decent standing. So I would definitely say Steph Curry.
Yeah. I'm just curious, guys, what your thoughts are. So the Warriors, they're 3.5 games back of the Portland Trailblazers for the 6th spot. Do you guys think the approach this year changes with this new kind of play-in format? Because realistically, the Warriors jumping up 3.5 games to get into that 6th spot and not be in the play-in series like the Blazers currently are, is unlikely. There could be a little movement between, Dallas and Portland, so for say. But Nick, I'll just go around the horn again, guys. What do you think is the approach here in this last month of the series for the Warriors, or really any of these bubble teams that are kind of in this range?
Well, I'd say it's different depending on the team. Like if you're Dallas right now, you're doing everything you can to get out of that play-in because you're not that far behind of the Trailblazers, and you don't want to deal with like a fluky Steph Curry game that keeps you out of the playoffs. But I could see a team that's maybe like a bit behind, but knows they're not going to go all the way out, maybe letting off a bit. But I think for the most part, most teams are going to try to play as hard as they can to try to either avoid the play-in or be a 7 or 8 where you at least have to only win one of two. So yeah.
Jack, what you thinking here, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think the mindset can change a little bit. Like a team that's on the outside, they can relax a little bit. They don't have to be in the top 8. Like if they're sitting at the 9 or the 10, they don't have to go on a win streak to get in. And also teams outside of that, like the 10 and the 11 seed, if they're not like if they're 5 games away from the 8 seed in the past, they might be like, okay, like, I don't know, like at the end of the season, they can just, they lose hope. But if they only need to go up 2 more games to make it to the 9 seed, then they have more hope and they maybe, try a little bit harder and they last longer in their playoff hopes.
Final thoughts there?
I think obviously it depends on where you are. Like if you're the Mavs trying to get to the 6th spot to avoid the play-in game. But I think if you're the Warriors and the Spurs kind of just behind by a couple of games, I think you got to prioritize your health right now, especially for the Warriors. Steph's been out a couple of times with different things. So I think you just got to prioritize their health because obviously you want your best players healthy. But like if it's not realistic that you're going to catch up, then you shouldn't really try to force anything, especially with like the play-in game, knowing like, okay, especially if you're the Warriors, knowing you'll have the best player on the court and no matter who you're playing in the play-in game. So I think you got to prioritize health.
Yeah, and it's not really like you've got anybody really in the chase here. New Orleans still 3.5 games back, and the Sacramento Kings, who I'll talk about a little bit later in my thoughts about blowing up rosters, are 5 games back of the Golden State Warriors. My final question, guys, I know I'm talking a lot about Curry here. We mentioned it earlier, guys. Do you think this Steph Curry is better than the unanimous MVP or MVP in 2016? We'll go around the horn again. Nick, your thoughts?
I don't know if I'm ready to say it's better than the unanimous MVP Curry because I know that team was a lot better, but he was also unreal that year. But I think he's at that level. I think he's about as good as the second MVP year and probably better than the first one. But it might be more impressive this time just because he's got no help.
Jack?
Yeah, it's super tough to say. I mean, I know you can say because of the recency bias that he's been better right now, but I mean, I think we forget about just how incredible he was in those 2 MVP seasons. I mean, he was doing similar stuff and winning, 73 games. So I think it's really, really hard for me to put this season above the other MVP years, but I definitely think that he's approaching that.
Oh, yeah. And Jack, I want to piggyback on that. I mean, when you have a surrounding cast like Clay, oftentimes, guys, it lowers down, it evens out. Curry's place stayed there. It was really phenomenal.
I was gonna say, even like I could argue that like the role players on like the unanimous MVP season were a lot better than the role players on this team. Like even the guys like Harrison Barnes or like an Andre Iguodala, like those kind of players, they're better than the like guys coming off the bench for this Golden State team. But I just wanted to point that out.
Oh yeah, I'd certainly hope the role players of a 73-9 team are better than this one.
Yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, because I'd say they were better than maybe some of the starters on this Warriors team. So per se. Any final thoughts there?
Yeah, I think it's hard to tell just because they're asked to do like a lot of different things. Like this Steph is asked to carry, literally, just carry, keep us afloat. That Curry was like, all right, like we're trying to win a championship here, man. Like, and you got Clay, so you have an off night. Clay gets hot, And Nick brings up a good point with the role players like Iggy, Sean Livingston, David West. Like that makes a huge difference because even if they're not scoring, they can still affect the game in other ways. And this Warriors team clearly lacks that, especially when Kelly Oubre is over there going 1 of 20 from 3 in the corner.
Yeah, and kind of combing his hair or whatever he likes to do to look good in the corner. Yeah, Kelly Oubre is quite the figure there. So, guys, we talked a little bit about the play-in tournament this year that they added in the NBA playoffs. It is going to be featured from May 18th to May 21st. The format will be a 9-10 and 7-8. The winner of the 9-10 will play the loser of the 7 and 8. The winner of the 7 and 8 will get the 7 seed. And then the final winner of the 9-10 versus loser of the 7 will get the 8 seed, if that makes sense. Curious what you guys' thoughts on this. We had the play-in game last year. Now we're getting the play-in tournament. Where do you guys think the NBA is going with this? Nick, I'll start with you.
I think right now they're still just trying to see how it's going to work for this year. Like if they get to the point where they have like a 10 seed that wouldn't have deserved to be in the playoffs at all, just get hot for 2 games and then just lay an egg. Like even though they're supposed to lose the 1 seed, like don't even compete in 4 games. I could see them maybe changing it or maybe even not keeping it. But right now, I think they're just trying to see what happens. They're still just trying to see how it affects the playoffs, how it affects the teams going up to the playoffs. And then they'll see what they do from there.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I was a little confused when I looked on my ESPN app and there's little brackets dividing the divisions into 3. It took me about, a couple of days until we did this podcast to realize the difference in that. But I mean, so for say, guys, here in the East, we've got the Heat, the Hornets, the Pacers, and the Washington Wizards. The Wizards are a dangerous team. They beat the Warriors last night or 2 nights ago, And I mean, this is a team that could realistically win that 4. Jack, I'm curious, could this be kind of detrimental to those 7 seeds that are obviously ahead of the 10 seeds?
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, it's detrimental. I mean, if they're a team that in the past format would have got in regardless, and now their spot is threatened, I mean, of course, that makes it worse for them. But I like this format. I think it makes it so that, like, if there's kind of like a fluky 8-9 thing, like, oh, the 8 seed gets in because they had a tougher strength of schedule or something like that, I think that could be a little unfair to the 9 seed. I think this fixes that. I mean, it gives them a chance, but the 7 and the 8 seeds still have an advantage. They're more likely to get in, but it still gives the lower seeds a chance to get in, which I like.
I totally agree with that point, Jack, because you could have teams that have like a weaker schedule there at the end that make a final push, whereas somebody's playing some really hard schedules. So that could be kind of an interesting thing to see. E, any final thoughts there?
So my initial understanding of why they did the play-in game was in response to COVID and just like the loss of games in general. So like for this year, like if a team gets hoed because, their whole team gets COVID and they can't play 10 games, like it's not really fair, especially with their tight playoff race. That was my understanding, to try to balance it out to make sure that happened. But it does like raise the question, like, does this devalue the regular season even more, knowing that, all right, well, we're only a couple games behind then the season. We just, keep chilling right here. We don't really got to worry about anything. So I think to an extent it does. I know Luka and Mark Cuban brought this up, and I do agree with them to a certain extent. I'm curious to see what they'll do next year, if they're going to keep with this. I think it will largely depend on how this year's play-in games go, because if they're like overtime, buzzer beater type games, the NBA is clearly going to keep going for it because, money rules around here. So, but I think it does devalue the regular season even further than it already does.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if teams are just going to settle with an 8 or 9 or even 10 seed just to get in, just to give themselves a chance. But then again, you could also create the point that maybe some teams with lesser talent give a chance to show themselves later in the season. So I think it goes both ways. I think it'll be very interesting to see. So some teams this year have had injuries. Some teams have had coaches changes, and some teams have just lost ball games. Guys, some teams are looking to blow and hit the nuclear button on their season and on their rosters. We'll go around the horn here, guys. Which teams do you guys think should just annihilate their rosters going forward and just rebuild from the ground up? Here, Nick, I'll start with you.
I'm trying to think of teams that have either not already done that or, I'm trying to think of teams that suck that haven't done it yet. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I think Minnesota is kind of tanking right now. still, even though after they gave number 1 pick and all that. But I think they should find a way to move Cat at some point because he's getting old. He's getting older, and the team around him is not going to be any good for a while. So I don't really see any purpose of keeping him on the team. And I guess if you didn't think they were tanking already, then that would further signify that they are.
Jack, do you have anybody you're thinking of here?
Yeah, and I mean, it may be a little bit early, but I'm honestly going to go with the Bulls. I mean, they traded for Nikola Vucevic in a move that was a clear win-now move, and I mean, they've arguably been worse. I mean, they're 10 games below 500. And I mean, I understand that it may be early and they may want to take longer, but I mean, if they continue going like this, I think that, you know, towards the end of the season, maybe give up some of these assets and try to get more draft picks.
Any last remarks?
I feel like it's really weird because normally I feel like there's always a team that doesn't have like a direction. But for like the first time in a long time, I feel like every team at least has like they know where they're kind of going, even if they're not all the way there. So I don't know if one team necessarily needs to blow it up. I will say some teams could definitely construct the roster better. I think the Warriors are at the top of this list because their bench is absolutely terrible. I think the Pelicans need to retool their roster because it just does not fit. Mainly get rid of Eric Bledsoe because he's just not that good. And then maybe the Raptors, like, what are they doing with Kyle Lowry? He's a free agent at the end of the year. They have Fred VanVleet, but I don't know if you really want to keep him because maybe around the time where you have some younger guys start coming to their own who might be on the back end of his career. So I feel like there's not really one team that necessarily needs to blow it up, but I think there are a couple of teams that could just construct the roster better during the offseason.
Yeah, I agree. I really like that one. And guys, like I mentioned earlier, you know, I think two teams I think that could really use a reconstruction is the Indiana Pacers. And this is my opinion is because I always feel like they're in the 4, 5, or 6. They're always in striking distance and always fall well short of their goals at the beginning of the season. I think they could use a little upgrade there. And then, like I said, the Sacramento Kings, they just keep re-signing guys. I know my guy Harrison Barnes, but personally, I think they need to let some pieces go and really try to retool this team through the draft. I feel like they've got some young talent, but they still have a long way to go. Does anybody have any final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I like how you brought up the Pacers. I will say what's different about this year compared to the past years is for some reason they fired Nate McMillan. I have no idea why they did that. I don't know what – like he got them to a 4 seed with their best players out, so I don't really know what the thought process was in that decision. And, like, you have Sabonis, you have Karis LeVert, you have Malcolm Brogdon. So, like, I don't know what they are. Like, what are they supposed to be? Because I feel like talent-wise they should be in the playoffs, but they're not. Are they? I think they're the 9th right now, right?
Yeah, they're the 9th.
Yeah,
I think
so
they're
they're
2 games behind the Hornets.
So they're in the play-in game with 3 all-star level talent guys. One of them actually is an all-star. It's a bonus. Like, I just don't know what this Pacers team is. I know they've had some guys in and out. I know they traded Oladipo midseason, but I feel like they should be doing better. And I still don't know why they fired Nate McMillan. Like, as soon as the Hawks fired their old coach and he became the head coach, and they immediately became a way better team. So I don't understand why they fired him in the offseason for like the Raptors, like G League assistant coach or whatever he's from.
Yeah, definitely an interesting thought there. Adrian, what's going on, man? How you doing?
Doing well. Heard y'all were in need of some good sports takes, so I had to.
Of course.
Then
guys,
why would we bring you in here for that?
Oh, man. Yeah, guys, Backseat Coach podcast fans, we're welcoming in Adrian Tillman off the bench here tonight for his first appearance of the game. We're talking through the topic of teams that need to blow up their rosters this year. Any thoughts there, Adrian?
My first resort, or my first, when it comes to this, the first team that comes to mind is a team that's already in the process. That's Orlando. The Magic clearly are in reset mode with them shipping Vucevic out before the trade deadline, them shipping out Fournier. Those were 2 of their solid key pieces, but they were also Fournier was approaching 30 and Vucevic is over it. So it's a sign that they're moving in a new direction. And right now they just need to reset.
Yeah, I like that Jack brought up the Chicago Bulls earlier. I was thinking about them when I was thinking about this topic is at the trade deadline, I think that the Chicago Bulls were looking to win. And I think they were looking to make the playoffs, and I think they were looking to acquire people who were going to help them do that. And the Vucevic experiment here has gone kind of downhill, and I think it's kind of taken away from maybe some of the other players' value. I know that Levine maybe hasn't been the same. I mean, I know he was going ham there at the beginning of the season, but hasn't been the same value since then. Do you guys have any thoughts on the Chicago Bulls? Adrian, I know you just got here.
Yeah, I'll just say they've been really disappointing since they acquired Vucevic. I thought they basically had to make the playoffs, no excuses after they made that trade, and they've not been very good. And now Levine's in COVID protocol. He's missing a bunch of games, and I don't see how they can be competitive this year. I don't think that we should necessarily blow up the team yet, though, just because Vucevic just arrived, and they may just have growing pains with trying to get him in the system. But yeah, they've been really disappointing.
They need a point guard badly. Like, of every team in the NBA, they need one badly. Like, they should have. I don't know what they offered for Lonzo, but I would have thrown Kobe White in there. I know that might be a hot take, but they need a point guard badly.
I can agree with that, because I think that Kobe's a very attractive trade prospect and can get you a solid bit back, but at the same time, he is not a good fit next to Levine. They're both
it's two scoring guards next to each other. Yeah. Go ahead, Adrian. Sorry, cut you off.
I was like, they're both volume scorers, average at best defenders, and you typically below average, and not amazing at distributing the ball. So it's like it's like when people put the hypothetical AI Kobe combination on their all-time teams. It just doesn't fit-wise, doesn't make sense.
Who knows? The Bulls might be the next stop on Chris Paul's rebuild tour.
Oh my gosh, that would be something to watch.
They better offer that man $50 million a year and part ownership and a statue next to MJ.
Yeah, to go ahead and put the gravestone on top of the grave here for the Bulls. 12 of their next 14 final games are against teams in the playoffs, and 10 of those teams are in the top half of the playoffs. So this could be a really, and I mean really, downhill spiral for the Chicago Bulls. Adrian, some of the other teams mentioned in the rebuild process were the Indiana Pacers, the Sacramento Kings, the New Orleans Pelicans. Any thoughts on there? Maybe the Grizzlies? No, I'm just playing.
I know. The Grizzlies been a 2-game slide, I think, isn't enough to blow up the team yet, especially with Jaren just now getting back. But as far as the other teams, the Pacers, I've been preaching that they needed to ship out one of their core pieces for years, just because it's an awkward fit. Sabonis and Miles Turner are both all-star level players, and the way that their team works, only one of them will ever get an all-star, and that will switch based on who gets more minutes. Sabonis is the better player, but Turner honestly has the potential to be a perennial all-star in a different situation. And I think that they wasted too much time on the experiment of trying to make them work alongside each other. Some of the other teams you mentioned, I was kind of interested by y'all throwing the Pelicans in there. They obviously haven't translated a lot of their talent into wins yet, but on paper, they look like they should be a competitive team. And so we've seen several games this year where they've played really well against really good competition. And, they just, for some reason, aren't able to consistently close.
Yeah.
So that team's young enough to where with core pieces of Brandon Ingram and Zion and Lonzo, they're young enough to hold on to that for another few years and try and see if they can turn that around.
Yeah, I just thought of sorry, go ahead. Did I cut somebody off? Okay, so I just thought of one team that might need to blow it up is the Boston Celtics. They really need to get rid of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and let me see. I tried to say it with a straight face as best I could.
Yep.
Full roster reset.
Yeah. So guys, we have 2 tributes tonight. on the Backseat Coaches podcast. I don't think we've done a tribute yet, but two big time retirees in two different sports tonight. The first one we're going to talk about is Lamarcus Aldridge. He called it quits this past week or 2 weeks ago with the Brooklyn Nets. He spent a little time there, of course, a short 5-game stint. Played most of his career, averaging 19 points per game and 8 rebounds with the Portland Trail Blazers and then eventually with the San Antonio Spurs. Does anybody have any words they want to say about Lamarcus Aldridge? The floor is open.
I mean, heart stuff is always serious. So I've got to say, at this point in his career, I respect him for recognizing health before, health is wealth. Health comes before everything else. And the man's had a long and successful NBA career. And it's a shame to see it end like this. But I'm glad that he is able to make the decision that's going to best impact his future.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on your health is wealth comment. This kind of reminds me of like the Andrew Luck situation. A guy that maybe had some great moments left, but had to call it quits due to some serious stuff, guys. So I want to talk a little bit here about Aldridge. He obviously attended Texas. He's a 7-time All-Star and 2-time All-NBA team, second team, and a 3-time All-NBA third team. So he has 5 All-NBA nods, and a player with 6 has always made the Hall of Fame, according to Blazers website I saw. And he's 49 points shy of 20,000, and every 20,000 point scorer except for Joe Johnson, Tom Chambers, and Antoine Jamison has made the Hall of Fame. This is obviously a big deal. Everybody wants to make the Hall of Fame after their career hopefully is done. Damian Lillard has already talked about pretty obvious that Aldridge's jersey is going to be retired in the rafters in Portland. What do you guys think? I'll go around the horn here. Jack, I'll start with you. Go Adrian, Nick, and then Ethan. What do you guys think first and foremost about his career, what he's done, and then maybe the jersey retirement and eventually the Hall of Fame? Jack, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, he had a super great career. Definitely sucks that he had to retire early, but I mean, like you've said before, I mean, health is the most important thing. So that sucks. But I mean, he had a great career for multiple teams, and I think that he will probably make the Hall of Fame. I mean, the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame is not the hardest Hall of Fame to make compared to the other sports. So I think that he'll probably end up there. And also, I think that he'll absolutely end up with his number retired in Portland, especially since in Portland, I mean, they have some guys' jerseys retired that are definitely not as prominent as Lamarcus Aldridge. I mean, guys like I'm looking at this list, like Bob Gross, Larry Steele, like people that, I mean, haven't really, like I looked at some of these guys' stats, and I mean, some of them haven't even averaged 10 points. So I definitely think that Lamarcus Aldridge will make the Hall of Fame as well as have his jersey retired.
Guys, I just want to pause you here for a quick second. Breaking news. I don't know if you guys know who Terrence Clark is out of Kentucky. There's rumors he just got in a car accident and may have died.
Oh,
yeah, pretty crazy.
No
It's
way.
streaming all over Twitter right now. He was like one of the top recruits. I think he was like number 9 or 10 this year. I hate to like kill the vibe right now, but Twitter's going crazy right now. If Terrence Clark, Kentucky guard, might have just died in a car accident. So, prayers up there. But let's continue, guys. Adrian, to you.
Oh, wow. First off, prayers up to Terrence Clark and his family. Hopefully everything's for the best there. If he was involved in that car accident, hopefully he's okay, and if not, a quick and speedy recovery. But on this Lamarcus Aldridge thing, I think that he has a Hall of Fame resume, and I think that a lot of his career, especially after San Antonio, the way that he played his game was so almost understated that it might be hard for people to remember without the benefit of hindsight just how good he really was. And I think he's a no-brainer to be retired in Portland. And I think that he will get the Hall of Fame. I think he's one of those people where it might not be the first year, might not be the second year, but he gets it. But I think that his game we'll look back and say, man, that guy was good. And there's a lot of players that we do that for, and there's no shame in not immediately recognizing. But I think he will get his roses.
Nick, any thoughts on Aldridge?
Yeah. First off, I want to reiterate what I want to also add to what Adrian said about the Kentucky kid. I really hope that it isn't serious, that he'll walk away from this, and hopefully he'll be fine. And even if he's hurt, that he'll have a quick and speedy recovery. And yeah, it's sad news for that. But when we're talking about Aldridge, yeah, he was a really good player for a long time in the NBA. He's definitely going to be in Portland's Ring of Honor, or have his jersey retired, or whatever they do there. And he's making the right choice for himself long term. And I think, I think he's doing the best thing for himself.
Ethan, any thoughts on Joe Johnson? Oh, sorry. Got cut off anyway. I don't know why I keep thinking that. All right. Ethan, any thoughts on Aldridge?
I think he'll definitely get his jersey retired by the Blazers. I think he should get it retired by the Blazers. I think he'll make the Hall of Fame. Like Jack said, the NBA Hall of Fame is pretty easy to get into. No offense to T-Mac, but he don't win a playoff series and he's in the Hall of Fame. So, I no offense, but like you ain't win a playoff series.
That's honestly a crazy stat right there.
But he was one of the best mid-range players of our time, like growing up, like on the left block over the right shoulder, made that like 6 out of 10 times every game, averaged pretty much 20-10 for his career, one of the most consistent players in the league. And I remember like when he first signed like with the Spurs, and like, oh shit, the Spurs, they're really about to run this back. And then the Warriors happened, but just he had a really great career. I wished it could have ended differently. I don't want to say I wanted him to. I obviously wanted to see him do well. Unfortunately, he's on the Nets, so I don't want them to win. But I hope. I wish it had ended differently. Wish he had gotten kind of just that one year where he's like chasing a ring or something like that.
Yeah, like he said, personally, he was one of my favorite players growing up to play 2K with. Easy cheat code, like he said, left block over the right shoulder. So let's talk a little bit. So obviously you mentioned the Spurs. I personally thought that he was a great fit with the Spurs. I thought he was a Greg Popovich kind of guy, pretty quiet, just did his thing. And that was obviously a team that, who thinks they could have done anything if the Warriors hadn't existed? I personally do think so. But so do you guys think this will be, personally, I'll go around the horn again. Do you guys think this will be a big loss for the Nets or not really? He did average 12 points per game off the bench. Of course, it's a 5-game stint there. But what do you guys think about that? Jack, I'll start with you.
I don't think it's a huge loss. I mean, they were playing well before he got there, and I think they'll continue to play well after. I mean, they have so many guys on that team that can take his place like that. I think that they'll be perfectly fine. Obviously, I mean, they'll miss the leadership and things like that, but I don't think that this will have a super big impact.
Adrian, any thoughts?
Not really anything to. I don't really have anything to tack on to what's been said before me. It's kind of general agreement.
Nick, you good? Or any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, as long as the Nets still have Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant on the same team, they're still going to be fine. This team is still championship or bust based on the way it's constructed, with or without them.
Yeah, Ethan. Any final thoughts there?
No, not really.
Okay. All right, let's move on, guys, to our final tribute of the night. Obviously, Alex Smith called it quits this last week from the Washington football team after an amazing career with over 35,650 career yards and rushed for 2,600 more. He's one of only 5 players to do this. Frank Tarkenton and John Elway were 2 of the others that were mentioned on that list. He's the 2020 NFL Comeback Player of the Year for a good reason, too. A pretty horrific injury there. First, Jack, we'll just go around again. Any thoughts on Alex Smith and his amazing career?
Yeah, I mean, I think he had maybe the greatest comeback from an injury. I mean, at least in recent NFL history. I mean, the things that happened to his knee were just awful. I mean, people didn't know if he was going to be able to walk or run or anything like that again. And I mean, 2 years later, he's out there playing football. And I mean, he wasn't elite by any measures, but I mean, he was pretty solid while he was playing after the injury. So I mean, it's really just inspirational. And I mean, the things that he was doing after the injury was really phenomenal.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys got the same vibes with Joe Theismann when that injury happened, but just some really horrific injuries that have happened to some Redskins or now Washington football team quarterbacks in the past. Adrian, any thoughts here?
I just, man, his career has been one that's been defined by injury, yes, but it's also been defined by an incredible amount of resilience and strength, and it will be a shame to see him out of the league, but it's great that he gets to do it on his terms. Obviously, and I think that he's somebody who never gets enough credit for being a good quarterback. The problem is he was a good quarterback several years in great quarterback situations. He was a good quarterback who gets injured, replaced with a fresh, hot out of college Colin Kaepernick, who then proceeds to light up the league with a style that nobody's seen before. And that cost him his first job. He gives years of good service to the Kansas City Chiefs to get replaced by God among us in Patrick Mahomes. And then obviously the injuries, it's just him being able to come back and play football this last year at all, let alone to go 3-1, 4-1 in starts, is nothing short of miraculous. But I want to give miracles credit, but I also have to recognize the incredible amount of hard work and dedication he had to come back to a sport that he loves so much. And one of the most strong and resilient things that he's done so far in his career is right here, knowing when to walk away for his family. And I really respect Alex Smith as a player, and I respect him as a person, and I hope for the best for him in his life after football.
Yeah, like Adrian said, he's been replaced by Swagger, he's been replaced by God, and now he's been replaced by Magic, because Fitz Magic is up next there in Washington. Isn't that right? But yeah, pretty crazy. He's been one of the most consistent quarterbacks, I think, of his time, and a lot of people take that away because of his 2-5 playoff record. But I mean, one of the guys that just comes in and does a great job in San Francisco, does a great job in Kansas City, and did a great job in Washington even this last year. A division championship for Washington was really big last year. Nick, any thoughts there?
Yeah, he's been a pretty solid quarterback throughout his career. Of course, he's been overshadowed by guys that have come in after him. That's who brought up, and he also, I mean, even when he was drafted before Aaron Rodgers, and that was probably something that people would overshadow him for. But the comeback that he made this past year was unbelievable. I mean, if anybody saw what he had to go through, like all the surgeries that he had to deal with just to be able to keep his and then to go from worrying about whether or not you're able to have your leg walk or run again to starting again in the NFL and playing well in the NFL is just unbelievable. I mean, the NFL Comeback Player of the Year award might as well be renamed to the Alex Smith Award. So I mean, it's just, I'm always going to respect him for that, because a lot of players in his situation would just straight up quit if they had to deal with what he had to deal with after he got hurt.
Yeah, I totally agree. E, do you have any final remarks on Alex Smith?
Yeah, I just want to re-echo some of the same sentiments. Like, he had one of the worst injuries we've ever seen, and like he came back from that. And like, if I were in his shoes, I don't know if I'd want to go back. You know, you have to like really be in love with the game and just be really dedicated to even want to think about coming back, especially with some of the stuff he had to go through. Like you talked about, he could have had his leg amputated, and like he almost died, and like he had a crazy amount of surgeries just to try to get back. So it was really incredible that he came back and was pretty much the same player. Granted, he wasn't as mobile because of the injury, but he came back, and I'm happy that he gets to walk away on his terms and not a doctor saying, I can't have you go out there anymore. So I think that's honestly the best part about this. Like, he knew when the time was right, and he knew when it was time to hang them up.
I think a big props needs to go to Alex Smith's wife and his kids, who are constantly there. I don't know if you guys watched his first return game. Pretty emotional moment there for his family, for his kids. I think a lot of people don't understand that when your dad comes home with a leg that's shattered and you're told he's almost going to die, a lot of people don't understand just how hard that is on his kids, who almost were left without a father for a while. So obviously a pretty emotional night, guys, with these retirement tributes here. And then, of course, prayers up to Terrence Smith, the Kentucky guard. We'll keep everyone updated on that going forward. But as for the Backseat Coaches podcast and some of the best brains in the sports world, we thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Big prayers up and a big congratulations as well. We always look at retirement as kind of a sad time, but it's actually a congratulatory time to these guys on amazing, amazing careers. Thank you guys and have a good night.